Night Shift by Stephen King, 2 a.m. on Friday. Hal was sitting in front of the elevator. The only place on the third floor where he could smoke, when he saw Warwick coming. It wasn't supposed for the foreman to show up at 3 a.m. during the night shift. He was supposed to stay downstairs, in his office in the basement. He drinks coffee from the heater in the corner of the desk. The weather was hot, the hottest in June in Geitsfalls. The thermometer was stable at 94 degrees at 3 in the morning. Only God knows the chaos during the night shift. Operate this machine. A stubborn machine made by defunct Cliff Land. In the year 1934. He has been working at this mill since April. This means he is still earning at least $8.77 per hour. Not bad, no wife, no stable relationship, no money. He has been moving around during the last 3 years. He moved from Berkeley College to work as a bus driver in Lactahoe. Then he worked in loading and unloading in Galveston. Then he went to Miami to work as a cook, to willing to work as a taxi driver and dishwasher. Then to Gates Falls where he works. He has not planned yet whether he will leave until the snow starts to fall. He was a lonely person. He liked working in these hours from 11 to 7. The only thing he didn't like was the mice. The third floor was long and abandoned. The lamp gives off a dim light. Unlike the rest of the floors, this floor was silent and at least free of humans. The mice were another story. The floor contained the cotton machine, and the rest was a storage for 90 pounds of cotton. They were stacked next to each other. Some of them were old and dirty. They were nests for the mice, huge creatures with fat bellies, full of lice and fleas. Hal used to collect weapons from soft drinks. From the trash basket during the break, and he would throw them at the rats when work was light, and retrieve them later during the break. Only this time. The head worker saw him coming up the stairs instead of the elevator, sneaking like the sons of the brothel keepers. Everyone told him so. "What do you intend to do?" He said, "Hal, the mice," Hal said, realizing the futility of what he said, especially after all the mice had escaped hiding in their burrows. "I throw them with cans when I see them." He nodded, shook his head, and said, "We don't pay you to throw the mice with cans, sir. Even if you gather them again." Harry did not send any orders for 20 minutes. He said, Hal, while thinking, "By hell, why don't you go get some coffee?" He nodded and shrugged as if the matter no longer concerned him. Hal said, "Maybe I'll walk up to see Wisconsin. I bet you 5-1 he's reading a magazine." Hal didn't respond. Warwick suddenly pointed. "There's one who dropped the scoundrel. Release this box on him." The mouse that was watching him from above the piles of rubble escaped. Warwick started laughing, then said, "I came for another matter. Next week will be the 4th of July. Hal nodded. "The mill will be closed from Monday to Saturday. Do you want to work these days?" Hal replied nonchalantly. what should I do? I will do it. Cleaning the basement. No one has cleaned it for 12 years. It's a mess. We will use the water hose. I think the reason is the city center's visit to the place. Do you want to work or not? The hourly rate will be doubled. Hal will be able to get $75, he said. Okay? Our appointment is on Monday. He followed him with his eyes as he returned through the stairs. He stopped and looked at Hal in the middle of the way. Then he turned to Hal, saying, "You've gotten used to being a spoiled college boy, isn't that right? Or what?" "Okay, college boy, I will remember that." Then he left. Hal sat down and lit a cigarette, holding a box of matches. Waiting for a rat to appear, and started imagining how things would be in the basement. The humidity, the darkness, the spiders, the musty clothes, and the leakage from the adjacent river, and the rats, of course, perhaps even the cunning. He threw it into the box forcefully. Then he smiled sarcastically as he remembered the sound of the warlock. "Well, young man, I will remember that." He stopped smiling and put the cigarette back to his lips. Then he returned to work, and after moments, the rats returned to stand on the sacks along the room, watching him with her unblinking black eyes. They looked like jurors in the court. 11 o'clock on Monday night. There were about 36 men. Sitting around the place. When Warrock came to the court, Warrock wearing a jacket and rubber boots, he nodded to Harry Wisconsin, who was very fat. Extremely fat, very gloomy. Wisconsin said when the labor leader came, "The place will be a bargaining table." "Wait and see, we will return to our homes greasy," said Warrock. Okay. We extended the place with a series of courts and the lamps below. "It is supposed that you will see what you are doing." Then he pointed to some of the bystanders, saying, "I want you to hold the hoses." We brought 80 yards of hoses for each one, and that must be enough. Don't be smart, and spray each other with water, or else your matter will end up in the hospital. "It pushes the water forcefully," said Wisconsin. "Someone will get hurt. Wait and see." Hal and Wisconsin were pointed at by Arok, and some men said, "You are the dirty work crew. You will go as couples." And each couple has a vacuum cleaner. There are remnants of old office furniture, bags of clothes and equipment. No one objected. Warrock said, "Okay, we took from the court. We divided the basement into sections. We will finish the matter on Thursday, and on Friday we will remove the equipment outside." Any questions? No questions. The foreman taught it to the worker's face accurately, and it gave him a sudden feeling something is going to happen. And he liked the idea. Warrock was not very comfortable. Warrock said, "Okay, let's get to work." At 2 in the morning, on Tuesday, Hal was very exhausted and tired from listening to complaints and Wisconsin, and he thought if something good would happen to stop his complaining, but he doubted that. Most likely something else would happen. For him to complain about, Hal knew that bad things would happen. Only a crime happens. For a reason he did not expect this smell. The smell of moving water, the disgusting putrid smell of the river, mixed with the scent of contaminated cotton. Decaying stones, algae. In the corner where they started, Hal discovered a colony of poisonous mushrooms. spread among the broken cement pieces, feeling it with his hand, warm, swollen. The lamps failed to remove my darkness. 12 years of darkness. I managed to push it back a bit. The walls were damp, covered with yellow stains. Sounds of water hoses. Giant rats, only God knows what they were eating down here, said Wisconsin. Let's stop to smoke. They were away from the eyes of others, Hal said. Okay. Then he leaned against the edge of the electric fan and lit a cigarette. Wisconsin said sadly, "This is not a human act." Hal did not say anything. He was thinking about Warwick. And in the mice, something strange. How are the two things related? Said Wisconsin, I want money. But oh my God. Oh man, this is not a human act, these mice. And he looked around fearfully. They seemed to be thinking almost. Hal said, shut up. Wisconsin looked at him and said, sorry man, I lost it. Oh my God. This place is disgusting, Hal said and started crying. This is not the work of humans. A spider sneaked from the edge of the exhaust and climbed his arm, then threw it in disgust from his arm. He said, yuck, while sucking on his car's smoke. Come on, we will finish quickly. He said, Wisconsin. In Asa, supposed it is assumed, 4 a.m. Tuesday lunchtime. Hal and Wisconsin sat with 4 other men eating their sandwiches with their dirty hands that cleaners failed to clean. Hal was eating while looking at the Glass Workers Union office. Warwick was drinking coffee and eating a cold hamburger. Sherry Brashew said Ray Abson went home. Someone asked, do you feel nauseous? I was about to. No, he ate beef before feeling nauseous. So the mouse stood up. He said, hail. What? One of them said, looking pale. Oh my God. Brashew said, yes. Ray screamed like women. And I do not blame him. You bled like a pig. Will that pass like nothing happened? No, sir, I will bleed 3 or 4 times like Ray before it's over. It was madness to him. He was shocked. It no longer mattered to him. Except a mass of fur. I have never seen anything like this before. Warwick put a bandage on it, and I took it home and told him to go to the doctor tomorrow. One of them said it was a lot at home. And tomorrow, as if he had heard, Warwick stood up and headed towards the door. Work time. The men moved slowly. To waste as much time as possible, while taking off their dinner jackets, bringing cold drinks, buying sweets, and started descending. An Aruic passed by Hal and tied it over his shoulder. How are you, college boy? And did not wait for his response. Hal said to Wisconsin, who was tying his shoelace. Come on. Then they went downstairs at 7 in the morning. On Tuesday, Hall and Wisconsin walked together outside. Hall seemed to be getting used to this polar bear. Wisconsin was joking in a disturbing manner. He had a round, chubby face like the moon, happy as children. They did not exchange words all the way. They crossed the bridge. They said some usual words. When they approached in front of Hal's apartment, Hal headed to take a bath. He was still thinking about Warwick. trying to explain his feeling, that something was connected between them. He fell asleep immediately when he put his head on the pillow. His sleep was intermittent and uncomfortable. He was dreaming of mice. At 1 a.m. on Wednesday, he couldn't go to work until the end of the shift. In one of the departments in the basement, he lit a cigarette. Hal closed a valve of one of the hoses, while Wisconsin was talking as he walked back and forth. Warwick started to feel anxious because work was progressing slowly. He will never be able to finish work on Tuesday. They are now working in one of the offices filled with stacked drawers, broken glass, torn books, office supplies, broken glass. Hal and Wisconsin were waiting for their cleaning to finish. To enter with their hoses, when a man with a large neck started brown hair, named Carl Michael, shouting and cursing. Then he stepped back and hit his chest with the leather glove that he wears on his hand, a big ugly mouse, and sees it striped with white lines, his eyes shining. And he was biting onto the shirt while screaming and kicking at the stomach of Carmichael with his hind legs. Carmichael hit him with his fist. But the mouse left a big hole in the shirt, and a thread of blood slipping from above his chest. Anger was dominating his facial features. He turned back and tried to vomit. Hal aimed the rifle at the mouse, which was big and moving slowly. A piece of Michael's car shirt was still in its mouth. The water pressure pushed it and threw it to shatter against the wall. Warwick came smiling at you. Then he tied it on Hal's shoulder, saying, "Surely this is better than throwing the young rascals with metal cans. Isn't that right, college boy? Isn't that right, Wisconsin? The young rascals have longer legs than us." Warwick pointed to a piece of furniture. "The hose sprayed here. Hey guys, clear the way with pleasure." Mike looked at Warwick, whose face was sick and twisted. Then he said, "I will regret doing that," Warwick said with a smile. "Oh, of course, move away before the water crushes you." Hal opened the water valve for the water to rush out of the hose. It hit with a thud and smashed 2 chairs. The mice were running everywhere. Mice larger than any mice he had ever seen before, while the men screamed in disgust and terror, things with big eyes, huge and smooth bodies. He saw one that looked like a 6-week-old kitten, continued to pump the water. He no longer saw more mice. Then he closed the valve. He shouted, "I'll show you, you bastard. Let's get rid of this filth," Mr. Abstain said, and he was a young man wearing a baseball cap and a t-shirt. "I was not hired to fight rats," Warwick asked in false affection. "Is this you, Abstain?" Abstain started hesitantly. But he stepped forward and said, "Yes, I can't stand seeing these rats anymore. I have been hired to clean the place, not to catch an infection or any disease or anything. Perhaps I should be excluded." There was a silent approval from others. "Eavesdrop and I'll show you Hal." But Hal was busy testing the hose valve, which he was holding. The hose opening was wide and was enough to knock down a man, 20 feet tall. "Do you say you want to stop your working hours, see?" "Yes, I am thinking about it. What about you?" "Okay, you and any other one want, but this means not returning to work again." "Stop your working hour, and you won't come back to work again. I will make sure of that." He said, "Hal, of course you will." He turned to him in Uruk. "Did you say something? The university?" No, just my throat's path, sir. The head of the workers, Aruk smiled. Something you don't like. Hal did not respond. Good. Let's remove the dirt. Then they returned to work. At 2 in the morning. On Thursday, Hal and Wisconsin were working on collecting garbage, and when they stopped to smoke, Wisconsin said, "Happy 4th," referring to the 4th of July. They were working near the north wall, away from the stairs. The light was dim, and the sound echoes deceived, making the rest of the men appear as if they were several meters away. Hal replied, then pulled out a cigarette. "Thank you." Wisconsin said, "Didn't you see any rats tonight?" No one saw anything. Perhaps they returned to their senses. They were standing at the end of a passage cluttered with equipment. Bags of cloth and 2 large old sandbags. Wisconsin said, "This is the Warwick, then the Basque." Hal asked, "Where do you suppose the mice went?" He almost asked himself. Not towards the walls. He looked at the broken pieces of tile. Maybe they drowned in the nearby river. Something black suddenly passed by them. Wisconsin screamed and put his hand on his head. Hal said as he watched him. "And Tawat," Wisconsin raised his head to see. Tawat, Wisconsin said sarcastically. "What is Tawat doing in the basement? He is supposed to be on trees and building roofs," Hal said softly. "It was great. And what is the bat but a 2-winged mouse?" whispered, and Wisconsin, "Oh my God." How did he manage to enter? Perhaps in the same way that the mice managed to exit. What is happening here? Call them, and I will show you from behind them. "Where are you?" Hal said mockingly, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Calm down. Are you the university boy?" "It's okay. Look." Then he knelt down and lit a match. There was a hole in the wet cement. "Strike it." He struck it and whispered, "It's wooden. Or what do you think? It's standing still. I saw another opening. There is another floor beneath this basement." Wisconsin said in disgust, "Oh my God." 3:30 in the morning on Thursday. They were in the northeast corner, Epstein and Brochu behind, with their powerful pumping hoses, when Hall pointed to the floor. "I think we can penetrate it here." There was a rusty metal ringed door in the middle. Then he went back to Epstein and said, "Close it for a minute." Then he called, Hey, and Aruik, it's best to come here for a minute." Aruik came, splashing the water with his feet. He looked at Hal, smiling sarcastically. "Your shoelace is untied." The university boy, "Look," he said, "Hal." Then he kicked the ball with his foot. "Something at the bottom. And what about this? This will not distract us from work." The university boy, "Here lies your rats. 9th lived down here." I've seen me, Wisconsin, and Tawata before. Some men gathered around the place, and they started contemplating the boy be I don't care. Work in the basement. Not in. You'll need about 20 men from the combatants. Trained men, look and heroic to Hal, as if it were an insect trapped under a glass. "You are truly an intriguing case. Do you think I care how many rats?" "Do you think I care how many rats?" Hal said, "I was at the library this afternoon and yesterday." It's good that you still remember that I am a college boy. I read notes from the Civil Organization Center. Do you know what I found? Your eyes were cold and dark. You can go, college boy. You are expelled. Continue as if he did not hear. I have discovered the matter. I found my mother. A legal order issued from the Gates Fall Center. Concerning rodents, you can spell it if you're surprised. This means disease-carrying creatures. Like bats, the hammers, unlicensed dogs, and rats, especially the rats. Rats were mentioned 14 times in 2 notes. My lord, the head of the workers, remembered that the minute I will leave, I will go directly to the city center and inform him about the reality of the situation here. Then stop enjoying provoking and arousing you. He covered his face, then continued. I think the matter between me and the city center can send a warning, and the place will be closed for a longer period than next Saturday by far. And I thought about what your boss might say. That you have paid insurance, and Arwick's hands were claw-shaped, you mucus. Will then looked down where the abyss. Then his smile reappeared. Congratulations, you have returned to work, the university. I think you have started to think rationally. He nodded and showed you while still smiling. Then he said, you are really smart. I think you need to go down. Do we need an academic person to give us his opinion? And you and Wisconsin. I object in Wisconsin. No, not me. Looked at him in Arwick. What are you? He remained silent, and Wisconsin Hal said in happiness. Good, we will need 3 detections. Do you want to take me? Another person, definitely not. Reply Hal. You? In the end, management, you must be responsible, don't you think so? Only me in Wisconsin. We see a lot of mice here. Someone laughed sharply. Warwick looked at the men. At the end, he pointed to Brochu. Go to the office and bring 3 reports. Wisconsin said sadly to Hal. Why did you put me in this situation? You know that I hate these. It wasn't me. Hal said, then looked at Warwick. He turned to him, and Warwick and did not lift his eyes from Hal. At 4 in the morning, on Thursday, Brochu returned with the disclosures. He gave 1 to Hal, and 1 to Wisconsin, and 1 for Warwick Epstein. Give the hose to Wisconsin. Warwick said, Wisconsin, okay, you're in the middle. If you find mice, take charge of them. Think about it. Certainly if there are mice, Warwick won't be able to see them, nor Wisconsin. And in the end, they will find an extra $10 in an organized envelope. Warwick pointed to 2 men. Lift this. One of the men bent down on the floor's drill and pulled it to open the pipe. For a moment, Hal thought, it will not succeed. The man tried to pull it in a sudden movement. While biting on his teeth, the other man placed his fingers at the bottom edge of the pipe to help open it, then suddenly released it while crying. His hands were full of huge beetles. The bottom was full of fungi and beetles that escaped in all directions. He said, Hal, and see, there was a rusty lock at the bottom side of the pipe. It was broken with a drill. But there shouldn't be a lock. At the bottom side, Vrook said, it should be at the top. Why? He said, Hal, for many reasons. Perhaps for this reason no one could open the door from this side, at least, because the lock was new. And for this reason also, nothing could below to climb up. He said Wisconsin. But who closed it from below? Hal said sarcastically. And he looks at Warwick. Oh, what a tragedy, Brochu whispered. I understand, Wisconsin cried. Oh my God. I am not going down. It was a faint voice, but expected, Sounds of footsteps of thousands of small feet, sounds of mice. Said Warrock, it could be creepy. Hal laughed loudly. Warrock pointed his flashlight downwards. Pieces of wooden stairs fell onto the stone floor below. There were no mice, said Warrock. These stairs will not bear us. Brochu stood on the first step and started jumping short jumps. Short jumps. The step was creaking, but it did not collapse under him. Warrock said, I did not ask you to do this. Brochu replied softly. You were not there when the mouse bit the shepherd. He said, Hal, let's go. Hal and Warrock walked on the edge of the stairs while Wisconsin walked in the middle. Between them, they were walking down together step by step. Hal, then Wisconsin, then Warrock. Their flashlight beams danced on the uneven floor, which was not level. The nose that he held was whiskey. Crawling down the stairs, when they reached the bottom, Warrock discovered the place with his flashlight. He saw some rotten boxes, some barrels. There were water leaks from the river, in some areas on the floor. Some of it reached the heels of their feet. Whiskey became silent. I no longer hear them. Move forward, hero. Their feet were trembling in the mud. Stop this. And aim his flashlight at a huge wooden box. On it, the letters Elias Varney. In 1841, Warrock asked, Was the establishment there at that time? Warrock said, No, built in 1841. What's the difference? Hal did not answer. Follow their progress. The place was bigger than expected. There was a strong foul smell of pollution and decay. What is this? And pointed to a column protruding from the ceiling to the feet inside the floor. Warrock then said, Indeed, no. It cannot. The outer wall of the facility. This floor is larger than the facility. Isn't that so? Warrock said, Then turn back, I will return. He wrapped his arm tightly around Warrock's neck. You will not go anywhere. Sir, the head of the workers. He looked at him and Warrock and started laughing. Are you crazy, university boy? You should not push others and run away yourself. Continue. Give me this, said Hal Wisconsin, and he took the hose from him and aimed it at Warrock's head. After you, sir, the head of the workers. Warrock advanced beyond the facility boundaries. The mice were standing on the sides, silent as death. Thousands of eyes were watching them. Warrock stopped and said, They are surrounding us. The university boy Hal replied, Yes, continue the march. They continued to advance while dragging the hose behind them. Hal looked back. The mice saw gathered to block the way back. Then he looked up. He laughed before lowering his head downwards. The bats saw this time, hanging on the ceiling with their feet, huge bodies. Look, said Warrock as he directed his flashlight downwards. A skull crimson in color. He saw the greatness of the arm, the greatness of the thigh, part of the rib cage. He said this. Continue. He felt something strange deep within him, something insane, thought. You will fall before me, the master of the workers. Passed through the bones. The mice stopped following them. Only Hal saw one crossing among them. Then darkness engulfed him. Hal heard a faint, strange sound he couldn't distinguish. The mice were moving here and there, sneaking on their bellies, urging them to move forward. Warrock said, Look, Hal, look. Something happened to the rats in the back. A hidden mutation. Could never appear under the sun. Nature rejected it, but down below, nature had another face. Terrifying. The mice were swelling. Their size increased to 3 feet. Their hind legs disappeared, as well as their eyes. They became blind like their flying cousins. They pulled themselves forward, turned around and looked at Hal, smiling a devilish smile, and said, "We will not be able to continue." "Do I have to see this?" Hal said. "It seems that the mice have accounts with you. Right, Warrock, please." "Please smile, Hal. Keep moving forward." Warrock looked at the mice behind, then said to Hal, "You are crazy." A mouse ran between my shoes and wig, who screamed, and said, "Turn on this flashlight." He found that the mice were very close and surrounded them. The wig started to advance, so the mice retreated. Hal looked at the wig. He found his face white as paper, and a thread of saliva running from his mouth to his chin. He turned and ran. He opened the hose valve and hit the high-pressure water on his chest, and threw him far away out of sight, and his screaming voice was drowned out by the sound of the rushing water from the hose. Then he heard Hal screaming, "Hal, Hal, oh my God, Hal." Then he heard a groaning sound, and the sound of bones breaking. Hal stumbled upon a mouse that started biting the boot he was wearing. He aimed the water hose at the mouse and opened the valve. It was huge, smooth. He has no eyes, and he has no eyes nor legs. When the flashlight was directed at him, the mouse emitted a muffled scream. Hal quickly turned back, hindering the mice with his trunk, whose pressure began to decrease gradually. Some of them managed to reach him and started biting the boot he was wearing. One of them climbed onto his thigh and started biting his neck. So Hal pushed him away with his hands. He had cut 3/4 of the distance to return. When his face was hit by a bat, he turned into a bat. His tail was still there. And he wrapped his tail around Hal's neck and sank his teeth into his neck, and he began to flap his wings. Hal took a stick and hit him with it, without him seeing, time after time, until he finally fell between his feet while he screamed. The mice ran like a flood and tried to move him towards the goal and said, climbing his feet. Hal ran while shaking his feet from the mice. Some of them were clinging to the thobe, at his chest, at his stomach. One reached his shoulder and started sniffing his ear. Another bat attacked Hal's head and began biting his scalp. Hal felt tingling in his body. And in his ears, the sounds of thousands of mice squeaking. He spun around himself, then fell on his knees and started laughing and screaming. At 5 a.m, "On Thursday, it's better for someone to go down," said Brochu, whispered Wisconsin. "Not me, not me." "Of course, not you, you coward," Orgon said as he was preparing a trunk. All right, let's go. I am Ebston Dingerville." "Nito and Estefenson, we will go to get the flashlights from the office." Looking down, Ebston thought, maybe they stopped smoking